What's going on, everyone? Welcome back into MLS Digest. The MLS Cup Final is rapidly approaching, and it was the LA Galaxy and the New York Red Bulls, as you can see here, that ended up booking their tickets to this year's final. And for both, it took very cagey efforts in the conference finals, with both winning by 1-0 scorelines. Galaxy against the Sounders at home, and then the Red Bulls traveling, which has been a theme for them these playoffs, traveling and winning. They ended up knocking off Orlando City in Orlando 1-0 themselves. And for both these clubs, it's been a long time coming in terms of even reaching this stage, getting this far. But contrasting kind of histories for both these clubs in terms of their overall success. For the Galaxy, they haven't been here since 2014, but they're the winningest club in terms of MLS Cup in the league's history with 5. But for the Red Bulls, they haven't been to this stage since 2008, and that was their only time ever reaching the MLS Cup final, where they lost, actually. So they have no cups to their name. They're looking to write their own history. They're also one of the longest standing clubs in the league, so they're looking for their first title. Galaxy, even though the club's been here before, this is a new batch of players. They're very hungry themselves, and they're looking for to add to their record and make it a 6th cup final. So it's going to be a very intriguing match, and there's a lot of storylines to get into. But before we do that, guys, please make sure to like the video down below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and have been enjoying this content in the last couple of weeks during these playoffs and are excited for the MLS Cup final. Let's get into everything you need to know for this upcoming match. So before we get into this matchup and the conflicting styles that these two teams bring, we first have to look at how these two teams got here. And for the Galaxy, they earned that number 2 seed in the West, slipped up on that last decision day instead of getting that 1 seed, but regardless, how did they get the 2 seed? Well, first, it was from the front office, listening to the fans after some very, unacceptable seasons in terms of not even making the playoffs recently and demanding change. And the front office listened, and they went out and had a great transfer window, bringing in the rest of what we now know as the Killer Peas to complement Riqui Puig on the wings, and that was Gabriel Peck, Joseph Paintsil, and then obviously still having Joveljic leading the line up top. And that paid dividends. The Galaxy were the 3rd best offense in the league in terms of their total goals, and then the best attack in the league in terms of their expected goals, expected chances. So just this blistering attack and a clear identity, just relentless attacking football all 90 minutes, and especially defending home field. And they did just that in Carson. Their only home loss this entire season was during the Rose Bowl game against LAFC, which wasn't even, where they normally play, so I don't really count that. And they were in that number 2 seed. They looked good doing it, and that earned them basically home field advantage for this whole playoff run since LAFC got knocked out in the second round. In that first round, they made light work of the Rapids, who overperformed expectations, brought in their own good signings, but some of those signings and their best players weren't available for that series, unfortunately. But I don't think it would have made much of a difference anyways. But still, that first home game to start the playoffs, they immediately put their stamp on these playoffs. 5-0 at home against the Rapids. In that return second leg, made it 2-1 at half, and then Riqui Puig scores 2 in the last 5 minutes to just inflate the scoreline. They never really seemed too, vulnerable in that series whatsoever. And then it's 3 weeks off between that first round best of 3 series and the quarterfinal stage or the conference semifinals because of the international break and just scheduling. And how do they return a goal in the first minute, one of the fastest goals in the playoff history, with Riqui Puig kind of a outside of the foot pass across from midfield basically to Peck, and then they cap that off against Minnesota with just 3 braces from Joveljic, Paintsil, Peck, just continuing to attack in the last 5 or so minutes to make it from even 4-2 to 6-2. Just embarrass your opponent and continue that momentum, feed every one of these attacking players, make their confidence at an all-time high. And then in the conference final or semifinal, Seattle brought a different kind of tactic. They made it very cagey. They were obviously one of the top defensive teams in the entire league. That's how they got to this point. They didn't play an attractive brand of soccer, but if they just kind of thought that when they got their chances, they would take them, but they just simply didn't have the personnel to take advantage of the Galaxy, despite the Galaxy being maybe a weaker defensive side than some of these teams in the playoffs, because that was their identity, just outscoring your opponent. But when it came down to a game like this, they showed once again that maybe they can win in a different way. And so that was an impressive win. And they did it once again at home. And now they get to host this final. So on the Red Bull side of things, completely unexpected. No one expected this. As the 7th seed, they kind of limped into the playoffs after a great start to the season, but then Forsberg got injured for months on end. And everyone expected either the Crew or Miami to get to this point from the Eastern side of things. And what do? They completely make the Crew look pedestrian on the road, hold the Crew to a shutout in their own home field, which is just insane. And then they have a shootout in that second game back at Red Bull Arena, win on penalties. Basically the first major upset of these playoffs. And then with Miami going out in that first round too, that just probably gave them even more confidence that it was anyone's, pick of the litter who would come out of the East, and they just took that on that why not us mentality. And with Forsberg completely healthy, they've looked a different team. They've looked that kind of Red Bull team we saw in the first couple months of the season, and have gone back to that identity, especially with the pressing kind of nature, their relentless kind of pressing. So then with that, after that 3-week break, you had that Hudson River Derby on the road against your rivals who you lost both your regular season games to in convincing fashion. And then you go out and get a 2-0 lead early off, honestly, just a screamer. And then another set piece goal, just an effort kind of goal, second ball goal. And that's just been the theme of the Red Bulls this season. Once again, they continue having to travel, went into that conference final to Orlando. Orlando didn't look too convincing. They played Charlotte and Atlanta and really squeaked by in terms of these score lines. But that's been the nature of these playoffs, is just who can capitalize on set pieces, other chances. And early on in the second half, it was one of their defenders for Red Bulls, Reyes, from a ball from John Tolkien, their other one of their wingbacks, on a set piece, and that was all it took. And then when they have to shut it down and hold on to a lead, especially in a rough road environment like that, they can. So they're the underdogs here again, and I'm sure they're relishing this chance. And that sets up these two conflicting styles that we're about to see with what should be a very, very entertaining game. So if you haven't already heard, Riqui Puig won't be playing in this MLS Cup Final. He tore his ACL in the 60th minute or so in that Sounders match, and yet he still played out the rest of the game. I don't know if he knew it completely or not, what he felt, if there was adrenaline probably kicking in mostly, but he continued to play on that, knee injury, and continue that same intensity he plays with first and foremost, but then obviously gets that game-winning assist in the dying minutes to, get the Galaxy to this final stage. And it's just all credit to him to playing through that. That's just unbelievable. And the big thing here, obviously, though, is he's missing this final. And even beyond that, he's likely missing most of, if not all of, next season. And that's just a terrible, terrible thing for this league. One of, if not, one of the handful of top players in this league, just a complete midfield maestro for this Galaxy side. 35 total goal contributions this season between regular season and playoffs. Has just completely been lighting it up. And for me, that really changes the whole complexion of this final, because we know that Red Bulls, how they're looking right now, they're back to their style. They love this, constant type of pressing and the counter pressing, and there's really no one player who's going to replicate what Riqui Puig can do, because he drops so deep to pick up the ball. We saw that especially in games against tighter teams like Seattle, who really brought it to the Galaxy and tried to make them make their own mistakes. But Puig was just on another level and was continuously, floating in and out of spaces to just beat two or three players and keeping the ball away from them, even when things got very tense. So I think Red Bulls are going to be on an even another level of that, because they have the attacking players on top of that Seattle didn't, with pace and just quality in general, a little bit more youth to really bring it to Galaxy. And it really depends for me how Greg Vanning lines this team up, because also you have Marco Royce, who's been dealing with his groin injury and he's questionable, but in the past day or two he's even said, Royce, that he feels confident that he'll play, and Greg Vanning has also echoed that. But does that mean he plays a full 90? I highly doubt it. Does that mean he plays only one half? But which half would that be? Because last time out he only played that first half before he had to come out. And to me as well, I don't want to throw any shade, but it's kind of like that Giroud situation. Like, they're kind of towards the end of their careers, a little older. And to me, from what I've seen from Royce, is that he is obviously still that playmaker, but in terms of this kind of game, in this matchup against this very intense team with the pressing, I'm not sure he's the right option. I don't think he brings that same level of intensity with the legs for a prolonged period, of time in a match, to be able to, have that same success and tracking back as well, potentially, you know what I mean? So that's the big thing for me, is who Greg Vanny lines up in that midfield, because obviously we're going to see Jovic up top and then, Payne Slopek on the wings. But I think what we've seen when Puig has been out, the 5 games he was out, he had a 3-game stretch of an injury and then 2 separate games where he was suspended on yellows. Only one of those games was after Royce joined. So before that was those 4 games. And there were some lineup tinkerings, with Jovic also being like kind of half injured with some substitute appearances. So that also changed the front of the lineup. But I think for the most part, the biggest constant during that time Puig was out was that we saw a midfield of Cerrillo, Delgado kind of as those 2 defensive mids, and then you had Fagundes kind of running this 10 role, that kind of Puig role in a sense. And so I think that's their best bet. I think Delgado is definitely slotting in for Puig especially, but I think it's really the time between Royce and Fagundes who gets the start, who gets more time. And I think it has to go to Fagundes. I would be much more confident. I think that kind of midfield has also just in general had more time playing together, and it's just simply what this matchup presents itself as. We've seen many playoff games and the upsets in these playoffs be decided by simply, not maybe because this team is per se better, but because the matchup just makes it a living hell for some of these top teams, like the Red Bulls were for the Crew, Atlanta was for Miami, obviously, but then Atlanta went out right away in their next game. So it's just matchup by matchup. You have to do, what is best suited for your team to advance or win. And for me, I think, I don't know. I wouldn't trust Royce to deliver the goods in that sense, to be fully match fit to play against a very highly intensely pressing team like Red Bulls. So it's hard for me to make a prediction without really knowing who's going to line up in that midfield. But I still think that Red Bulls bring a completely different type of threat in that attacking sense. I don't think they're just going to sit back. And Galaxy have shown they've shown a kind of lacking in set pieces. And that's what I kind of talked about in the build-up to the Galaxy Sounders match. But Red Bulls have been showing that on another level, that they can expose that. And that's been a big part of why they're here, is they take advantage of those set pieces. And they also have a little bit of pace, with Forsberg obviously pulling the strings as well to unlock a defense like the Galaxy's, which, Minnesota had little issue to kind of responding at certain moments of that game they had. So even with Puig out, I think this is going to be a higher scoring match, or at least both teams getting on the score sheet. But it's hard to give an edge, because obviously you have the Galaxy, who haven't lost at home, but you have your completely key cog in this system out. So it's how do you kind of make that up in the aggregate or what have you. And for the Red Bulls, it's been a bunch of traveling, but they're very motivated. They've done it before. Obviously, they've been doing it time and time again. on the road. So it's two very conflicting styles. But I think we see goals. I think there will be more goals than we've seen. And I think Red Bull can definitely pull their own punches and hang with this attack of the Galaxy, especially depending on what lineup they bring out in that midfield, because you could have those attackers if you want, but if you can't break that press and you can't send those attackers forward and break the lines, then it really doesn't matter. And then then they can maybe sit back a little bit more like they did against the Crew, and they have their own kind of counter players like Morgan to do the same type of damage. So we know how Red Bulls are going to line up. It's going to be kind of that 3-4-1-2 or 3-4-3 sort of. Van Zier, Forsberg, Morgan, Tolkien and Harper in that midfield or on the wings, and they have that good pairing with the Nealis guys. So Carlos Coronel has been just a man possessed these playoffs. It's been the kind of playoffs of goalkeepers at the same time. Even though the Galaxy have really been the only team blowing the doors off teams, but the rest of the playoffs, these matchups have just been decided by some really, really good goalkeeping moments. So not to take away from McCarthy as well for the Galaxy, because he's been standing on his head as well, made some really good saves in that Seattle match as well. So I don't think I'm going to give a prediction yet. I'll say that for a little bit later in the video, but I do see goals. It's hard for me to make a pick, like I said, without knowing that Roy situation or Fagundes and who gets more time or starts, but I think this is a more even matchup that can potentially go to extra time or such than the odds makers or whatever are kind of seeing it for the Galaxy kind of heavily favored. So that's where I'll leave it at that. So obviously both these teams are focused on the task at hand and don't really care how they win MLS Cup, even if it may not be as comfortable or according to their styles as they would like. But there are some other nuggets and storylines behind the scenes that may or may not come to fruition depending on the scoreline and the result in this matchup. So the first one being that Galaxy are going for their 6th cup, which would also extend their record for the most, but at the same time they're going for the most goals in a single playoff run. Right now they have 16. The record was set by Toronto FC back in 2016 when they won the treble, including the MLS Cup, but in their MLS Cup run they scored 17. So the Galaxy are only one off that, and they're going to host this one. Obviously they've been unstoppable at home, and not just that, even if they draw or whatever, it's very unlikely they get a 0-0 draw at home. And so for me, it's almost like a given that they score. So I think they at least tie this record, but I think if they go out and win this cup, I think that's their brand where they pile the goals on. And so I think if they do win this cup, I think it's going to also be in that sense breaking this single playoff run goal record. So that's also on the cards here. And then also the fact that their coach, Greg Vanney, had a long playing career and has had a longish coaching career in MLS. And as a player, he kind of played for a long time with the Galaxy during the kind of opening decade or so of this league's existence. And he reached 3 MLS Cup Finals with the Galaxy, but he went 0-3 in those. And then as a coach, he started off with Toronto FC, and he was coaching that Toronto team that I just mentioned that won that treble, won the 2016 Cup. So he's won the Cup as a coach with Toronto, but he actually made 3 total Cup Finals with Toronto, all against the Sounders. That was a staple fixture in the final, in a decade or so ago. And he went 1-2 total. So in total, he's 1-5 in Cup Finals, player and coach combined. 1-2 as a coach, 0-3 total with the Galaxy. All those were as a player. So this is his first Cup Final as a coach for the Galaxy, and he's trying not to go 0-4 combined, involved with the Galaxy in the Cup Final. So he's kind of made mention of that as well. He wants to make up for those losses he had as a player. But he has at least won a cup as a coach in this league. So he's been here before. On the other end, Sando Schwartz Red Bulls coach. It's his first year in MLS whatsoever, and he's reached this stage. So congrats to him. There were a lot of questions during the later part of this regular season about what direction this team was going and everything. It was kind of more of the same because of their kind of plummet in the Eastern standings, seventh seed, and all that. But obviously, with some key players returning like Forsberg, some health, and then just a complete commitment to their system that we all kind of have known Red Bulls for in the past handful or so of years, they have reached this stage. So he's already found success as a coach in this league after coming from Germany, and so both these managers looking to make their stamps with these teams because they have not found success. Schwartz hasn't found, it's his first year in MLS whatsoever. He's trying to start it off with a bang, and Vanny is looking to avenge some demons in terms of his history, in MLS Cup with the Galaxy. The Red Bulls front office is also paying for 700 tickets for their supporters to go to the MLS Cup Final and have that dedicated supporters section that obviously you have at every away game, but just good on them for doing not just that, paying for those tickets, which are going to be, up there compared to a normal MLS game, but they're also covering their travel fees and reimbursing them in that sense up to, I think it's like $300. And that takes a lot of pressure off loyal, passionate fans, especially the ones who are in those committed supporter groups who like to go to almost every away game in that sense. And so this is going to be a great experience for them. And the Red Bulls front office is committed to having a great environment in Carson. But they might have that many, but that LA support is going to be going nuts as well. They've had just great turnouts these entire playoffs, and they had some great tifos and everything like that. So overall, it's just going to be an amazing environment and an amazing cup final. It's time to make my pick, and I kind of alluded to it, but it comes down for me to the lineup decisions for the Galaxy, who Vanny starts and who gets the majority of these minutes in midfield. Cerrillo's obviously a lock. I think Delgado's most likely a lock. And I think it really comes down between Fagundes and Royce. So are you going to go with your big name guy who's aging and dealing with this injury to start and play the majority of the minutes? Or are you going to sub him on in a later stage if the game is still maybe in the balance? The energy level is a little lower because of that pressing from Red Bulls, and you're still tied or in the lead. So for me, I would go Fagundes starting with Cerrillo and Delgado, and then save Royce. He can unlock and take advantage of a more tired Red Bulls team instead of expecting him to be full 100% ready off this injury. And deal with the intensity that Red Bulls would bring to try and make them make mistakes. But honestly, you cannot replicate Riqui Puig's end product and his calmness on the ball against a team like Red Bulls. With just one player, you need to do it in the aggregate. And Galaxy's defense, I think, has, regardless of this run, shown risky moments and faltered. And I think this midfield won't be able to handle that pressure early enough. But I still think both teams are going to get on the score sheet. Like I said, I think it's going to be a back and forth game. But I fear that the Galaxy's wingers are going to get shut down. And we saw that a little bit with the Sounders. When they went one-on-one and you had these coordinated blocks, it wasn't so easy as running in behind, and I don't think Red Bulls are going to allow that those balls to be played through the lines for them to be exposed like that. I just don't think their press will be broken in that sense. I think this one goes to extra time. I think Red Bulls get their first MLS Cup. I think they're going to pull off this upset. They've been doing it these whole playoffs. Yes, they're traveling constantly, but they've had enough time to rest, in my opinion. and I think they're just going to leave it all out there. And in the end, I think either team is very worthy. I know Red Bulls come into these playoffs as a 7 seed. Everyone was down on them. But at the start of the season, they were looking very good as a healthy team, and now they're healthy again. So that's really the only thing people are holding against them is their seed here, that, you know, they didn't maybe face the best teams round after round to get here, but beating the Galaxy would be completely shut all that up, even without Puig. And I really have no dog in this fight. I would love to see either of these teams win. Galaxy have just been one of the most fun teams to watch in MLS history, and the Red Bulls bring their own style with their own star players. I think Forsberg and Morgan are more than enough to do the business, and especially the set piece creators and finishers they have are more than enough to disrupt the Galaxy's chemistry and their comfortable nature in midfield without Puig. So to me, I think it's going to be an entertaining game even without Puig. But yeah, I see the Red Bulls winning the first MLS Cup. Unfortunately for the Galaxy, I don't think they'll be adding to their record 5 cups as of now. But I really don't mind if they, you know, if either team wins. That's just my prediction. Let me know what you guys think down below. And it's going to be an exciting MLS Cup final. Make sure to like and subscribe to the video once again, guys. And I'll see you after the final for some reactions and some other news around the league. Make sure to enjoy the game. It's going to be on Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern once again. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.